Hello and welcome back to Mask of the Plague Doctor by Peter Parrish with me, Borden. Okay, before we get into things, I have a couple of things to say. So first up is that I'm changing the way I record these. So in the past, I would have hit record, done an episode, and then finished that recording. And then that would be edited up and I'd add things in and stuff like that. But each like 45 minutes to 50 minutes would be just one session of recording. Now I'm changing it in that instead of that, I'm going to do all of this chapter 8, no matter how long it takes, and then finish that recording, and then through the magic of editing, put that into episodes, probably 2 I'm imagining for this one. And then each one will have its own intro and outro as well for that. So that's slightly different. Probably not much difference for you guys. Just maybe in terms of like the transition from one to the other will be different because there's not going to be a transition when I'm actually recording. The next thing then is from the previous episodes. Hopefully some of you have noticed that I've been adding in a lot of sound effects and ambient noises and music and stuff like that to try and enhance the experience of the game. And hopefully people have been enjoying that. I've been enjoying kind of trying to match up sounds to what the narrative is talking about and stuff like that. Yeah, hopefully that is enhancing your enjoyment of what is a great game anyway. Then the next thing is, before we get started, we're going to have a look at the stats. So because of the way I'm changing recording, we won't have a look at the stats in the next episode because I won't know when that's starting or anything like that. So I don't want to just kind of in the middle of it jump into looking at the stats again. So let's see what we got. So physician still pretty low at 32. Surgeon at 56, mysticism 59. Surprised that's above surgeon, but we did do one thing to try and win people over. Presence is 46, it hasn't really increased. Panache is the same, 48. Resilience is 54. We are still more compassionate than ruthless, still more blasphemous than pious. We're really leaning into the populist side of things now over the feudalist. We are extremely principled compared to opportunistic. And we're slightly more jovial than dour. Sorting the contagion, we're doing pretty well on. Progress on the cure, not so good, especially when you see how far it's lagging behind the spread of the infection. We are really also leaning into causing unrest. But crowd favour seems to be pretty okay for the moment. Popular support for Corvée is 46%, and Dweller influence is 42%. Then our own relationships. So Alice now is at 67, slightly edged ahead of Lucia. Ayoko is still at 46, Sybil at 27, and then Alviva and Roslyn 43 and 44 respectively. So both of those are kind of coming around to us. Quelm is still at 30%, so for him, like, we've done some things that maybe would ingratiate us a little bit towards him, and then done things that pissed him off as well, so you can see why that's kind of staying where it is. And right, I really do hate that thing keeps popping up. I wish it was just, there was a thing where you could say, hide, stay away unless I press the Windows button. Right, now we are going to, let's just go, we want to go back to the game, right? So let's hit next there and return to game. There we go. Okay, let's get going on this. Alice's lantern has passed into your hands as the three of you descend the stone stairs in single file. Gloom nibbles at the fringes of the candlelight as you make cautious progress, mindful of the uneven steps beneath your feet. As you travel farther down, your elbows and shoulders begin to graze against the encroaching surfaces of hewn walls. One section is so narrow that it becomes necessary to turn your entire body sideways in order to fit through. The air smells different here, removed from the ailing streets and lingering miasma of the tannery. It is a damp, earthen aroma, like the topsoil of tilled fields after heavy rain. You feel moisture on the walls, and your light picks out grooves on the surface, formed over countless seasons of droplets of water. As you descend farther, you wonder how much labour went into the construction of the steps beneath the soles of your boots. The long-forgotten townsfolk of Thornback Hollow devote their lives, and the lives of their descendants, to cleaving through earth and solid rock. Your mind wanders as the staggered sounds of careful footsteps ring in triplicate. In the flickering illumination, you begin to see the shifting outlines of long-eared creatures. Your thoughts turn to rabbits under the stewardship of Richard Cogg, dwelling beneath the mayor's mansion in their own sprawling tangled warren. The anticipated next step never comes, and your foot finds thin air. For a good dragging second, it seems as if momentum may carry you over, until a steadying hand grasps your upper arm. "Careful there," Ayoko says. "I don't want to be dragging your carcass back up these steps in the pitch black." You regain your balance and breathe out a word of thanks. The lantern sways at a tinge, scattering fitful points of light across your surroundings, mirroring the adrenaline flutters in your heart. As your nerves calm, you steady your light source and aim it ahead. The absent step has half crumbled away. With care, you stretch your leg to the one beyond. To your relief, it appears that the passageway before you is beginning to widen. The walls no longer threaten to pin your arms to your sides. In the glow from the lantern, you can see that a final sequence of steps leads to a tall opening, carved or eroded into approximation of an archway. We definitely don't call on the deities. Yeah, I think we would feel a flutter of excitement. We've been running around town a bit, and generally things have been working out badly for us. And maybe down here now, away from all of that, we can, be optimistic again and be excited about something. You aid your colleagues down the last portions of the staircase, handing the lantern back to Alice as she alights on the level portion of rock beneath the archway. As the echoes of your footfalls cease, you are struck by the absolute silence of your surroundings. Not a hint of wind, no voices, no wildlife. The stillness is insistent, almost aggressive in its totality. You softly clear your throat, seeking reassurance. The sound has not yet deserted this place. Holding the lantern before her, Alice steps through the opening. You hear an intake of breath from the other side. The chamber in which she stands is many times wider than the staircase you just descended, and stretches up so high that the candle glow cannot hope to chase away the gloom. Lining each side of this underground hall, and stacked as far as you are able to see, are rows of stone sarcophagi. "A mausoleum," Alice whispers, her voice tinged with awe. "It's magnificent." "It's eerie," Ayoko remarks, folding his arms and peering up toward the space where the ceiling must hide. You stay close to Alice, using the light from her lantern to examine the worn inscriptions along the edges of the caskets as you walk their length. Time and damp has eaten away at the intricate detailing, but you are able to make out designs in the shape of twisting roots, overlaying carvings of scattered leaves, and a bold outline of grand floral patterns. Decorative crests, their heraldry lost the ages, adorn the crafted surfaces. "Gamal," Alice says, plunging your studies back into darkness as she directs the illumination across the other side of the chamber. "Does it look to you like this sarcophagus was recently disturbed?" The light flickers across the scraping and debris of a broken seal. A heavy lid lies slightly askew. You advance with care, following the yellow radiance of the lantern. The smell worms its way beneath your mask. dreading the aroma of decomposition into both nostrils. At your side, you hear Alice swallow back some bile, her closed fist held against her mouth of her mask. Gathering your resolve, you lean closer, over the casket. The lid rests uneasy, and through the silver of revealed space, you think you can see strands of human hair. Alice doesn't seem in a good position to look at the body, so let's have Ayoko. Ayoko, take a look at this body. I want your assessment. My assessment is you don't wish to get your hands dirty, Ayoko replies. Nonsense. I just want our best surgeon to examine the corpse, you say. The best surgeons aren't generally found on the ground poking at suspicious dead bodies. Just help us push back this lid so you have room to work. Ayoko's rasping chuckle suggests he feels he had the better of that exchange. With Alice at his side, they join you in inching the gap wide enough for one person to fit their forearms and hands inside. Tugging at the paucity of the conditions, Ayoko pulls out several surgical fleams and lays them on the rim of the casket. Light, he says. You raise the lantern higher, casting a dull yellow glow. He makes a noise approximating thanks and picks up one of the short knives. Keeping the candlelight as steady as you're able, you watch him work. Can barely see what I'm doing, he grumbles, withdrawing his fleam from inside the casket. No fault of yours, Gamble, but a lone candle in this gloom, the surgeon trails off with a frustrated shrug. From stench alone, the death appears more recent than the construction of the sarcophagus. Oh, that was Alice. Alice says, speaking through the fingers of her gloved hand once more. Yes, she was definitely not going to examine this. Aye, that much seems right, Ayoko nods. One of the poor bastards who paid for passage out of town, perhaps. The candle begins to splutter. The candle flame inside the lantern has burned almost the end of its wick. It flickers and spits, throwing strange shadows across the stacked rows of sarcophagi that surround you. As Alice hurries to produce and light a replacement, your mind lingers on the prospect of being trapped in silence and darkness, lost and forgotten beneath the streets of Thornback Hollow, in tune with the same finality as the hidden bones that surround you. A new candle, burning strong and bright, pushes through those feelings back to the edge of your mind. You glance around at your colleagues, wondering with what anxiety burrows inside their respective thoughts. We should keep searching, Ayoko says. I'm doubtful the tunnel ends here. Here then, says Alice, handing him the lantern. Your turn to be light bearer. Behind you lies the entrance to the mausoleum. Ahead, one wide, straight corridor. Holding the lantern behind him, Ayoko takes the only path available, heading deeper into the chamber. As he walks on, you see him stumble, his foot catching against something on the ground. He crouches, passing the candlelight over a small pile of rock. Ayoko moves the lantern with care, passing it over and along a trail of stones, ever increasing in size. As he stands, the light travels with him, flickering up over a gouged space where a portion of the chamber's back wall once stood. Roots, each exploratory strand the size of a thick branch, have pierced and spilled their way inside. They cling and wind, reaching into the mausoleum like a deity of death, seeking to claim what is theirs. Alice steps forward, running her hand over one of the encroaching tendrils. Incredible, she says. Look here, Ayoko says, standing by the doorway-sized hole left by the roots. You move closer to see what your colleague has uncovered and find yourself looking at a symbol scratched out in white, an imperfect circle with a crude arrow pointing straight through the rift in the wall. Not too many ways to interpret that, you say. Ayoko scoffs. Seems some of the guides actually did their jobs, he says, rather than... His voice trails off as he turns to look at the casket you examined moments earlier. Those routes are magnificent. This expedition is proving quite fascinating. You and I have somewhat different interpretations of the word fascinating, Ayoko says. For this situation, I'd opt for perilous. Oh, hush, says Alice. Let the two of us gather what joy we can from these circumstances. She turns your way and you feel her hand rest on your shoulder. I'm with you, Gamo. I've never seen anything on this scale before. Then perhaps one of you can lead the way, he replies, since you're so eager. Alice laughs. That lantern's in your capable hands for now. Grumbling to himself, Ayoko holds up the light and squeezes past the dense mass of roots, finding a human-sized opening through which to slip. As the glow from the lantern dims, you hear him call out from beyond the contortion of plant matter. There's a way through! Come on! You keep a sure footing as you try to follow your colleague's path. The roots are firm in structure, but slick with damp, making it safer to plant your boots in the gaps between, against the drier rock surfaces. You advance with caution, using what few patches of illumination creep through from Ayoko's side, mindful that a misstep could result in a twisted ankle or worse. Behind, you hear Alice making similarly careful progress. At times it seems she's holding her breath. Ayoko's hand reaches out to you, helping to haul you over the last gnarled hurdle. In turn, you offer Alice your assistance and pull her free of the chasm. By the light of the lantern, you are able to see that the three of you now stand in a natural cave, enlarged by the eroding roots that curve and twist along every surface. Nooks and crevices persist along the tunnel's length. But short of turning back, there's only one clear direction of travel open to you. Advance down the tunnel. Together you pick your way along the cave passage, following the slope downward into the dark. Your eyes and limbs feel weary, and you realize that in this subterranean space you've already begun to lose track of time. Ahead of you, Ayoko pauses and motions for you all to stop. Stoop. Okay. You trace your fingers along the rocks above your head, as if trying to push the narrowing tunnel away. A flash of sweat prickles your skin. Beneath your mask, your cheeks are flush. Strange sounds reach your ears, and you recognize them as your own rapid breathing. Something unseen squeezes your chest. Aware of the rising signs of panic, you direct all the composure you can muster to controlling your breath. The underground air fills your lungs, pushing back against invisible constrictions. You reach to tip your mask upward, allowing the cooler temperature to touch your face. I'm anxious too. Alice's voice takes you by surprise. As an awareness of your surroundings returns, you see the outline of Ayoko's back, framed by the lantern glow, much farther down the tunnel. For the past few seconds, you've been locked in place. A reassuring hand rubs your shoulder. I turn and smile, wanting to reciprocate the gesture. Alice releases your shoulder to lift her own mask and smile back. A wordless bond passes between the two of you. Emboldened and taking slow, deep breaths, you start to edge forward once more. Listen! Ayoko calls back. You turn your head, but hear only the receding thump of agitated blood. It sounds like water, Alice says. Are we beneath the river? The rush in your ears changes in tone. Now the sound of water is unmistakable. Head toward the water. Much to your relief, the tunnel starts to widen. The entrapping walls fall farther away, and the three of you emerge from the passageway into a vast natural cavern. As Ayoko moves the lantern in a slow arc, you see the source of the sound, a steady stream of water cascading from above, tumbling over shelves and ledges of rock from some unreachable opening. The water cuts across the path ahead of you, pooling in the uneven trenches and troughs, then cascading over the leftward edge into an embracing emptiness beyond your sight. Farther ahead you spy a patch of level terrain and a streak of dark colour. Keeping yourselves tight against a secure right-hand wall, you work your way around the ledge towards the flattened shelf. Water drips on you from unseen stalactites, and the spray from the miniature waterfall douses your robes. The stream itself is relatively shallow, flowing halfway up to the openings of your boots as you wade across. As light from the lantern swings over the rippling surface, you see it reflect off shimmering minerals being carried along by the current. A short incline sweeps upward from the bed of the stream, leading to the wider shelf of rock beyond. You feel the weight of your fatigued legs as you follow Ayoko up the slope, dislodging pebbles and other small pieces of stone as you drag yourself on. "Looks like a camp," Ayoko says, pointing. You see fraying pieces of burlap fabric stretched over a natural alcove in the rock face. In front, you see a circle of stones containing the charred ashes of a long-dead fire. To the side of what a generous observer might call the entrance is another symbol, carved in the same white hue as before. It denotes a crude dwelling. Next to it, you see the shape of a fish. "Calling it a camp seems a bit of a stretch," you remark. "More than I expected down here," Alice says, stepping off the slope and inspecting her mineral-streaked boots. "I say we take advantage. The hour must be late." "How can you tell?" you ask. "It's dark, isn't it?" You consider rolling your eyes, but realize she'd never see it. Let's see, we should get the fire going. Are we sure this is safe? So the marking suggests this might be some fish around here. There might be some fish around here. But we should get a fire going. Somebody else can think of the fish thing. "Good idea," Ayoko says. "The roots should burn well enough if we can find some loose, dry ones." "Sounds like you're volunteering," Alice says as she seats herself with her back against the cavern wall. "Good luck, Ayoko," you say, sensing a chance to have more time alone with Alice. "Oh, I see," he replies as he heads out. "Sending out the battlefield forager while you two get cozy." "Got any more candles?" you ask Alice. Not that I'm averse to sitting in the dark, but... "Several," she replies, producing another bulging pouch. "I wasn't sure how long we'd be down here." Ayoko brings the lantern closer, as she can use it to transfer the flame. With that gesture complete, he says a brief farewell and steps back onto the shallow slope. You watch the glow from the lantern get swallowed up by the cavern as he moves out of sight. Your own candle dances and flutters as Alice wedges it between a trio of stones above the alcove entrance. "There," she says, taking a seat with her back to the cave wall. "Now we can see our delightful surroundings." You laugh and try to make yourself comfortable alongside her. Not easy with the jagged surface of the wall nudging your back. For a time you sit in silence, looking at the charred remains of the campfire, wondering how many people last sat around it, and how many are still alive. "I just realized," Alice muses, "I've missed that sound." "The stream?" you ask, the rush and flow of its current still audible at this distance. "Ambler Ridge. The village where I grew up had a river that cut through it. Our home was close to the bank. I could always hear it at night. That sound, it meant, I don't know, that the world was still in motion, somehow. It was comforting. Does that make sense?" "As much as anything," you reply. "I don't think I've heard you talk about your past, your family." "Not much to tell. My parents are dead. I have a brother. Somewhere, I think. He left when I was still young. Perhaps the stream will help me sleep, for once. You've not been sleeping? Unease grips your gut. Alice lifts her mask. In the pearl light of the cavern, her eyes look even more sunken. Alice, Don't give me that tone. It's just too many late nights or early mornings, she says. But I do need to ask something of you, Gamel. If I were to catch the waking death, I want you to promise me that you'd give me every chance to test the cure. Every chance, Gamel. Even using my own body, if it comes to that. I'll submit to a quarantine, but do not prevent me from working. Her gaze is on you, committed and stern. This is a tough one because we're basically being drawn into her secret then. So the options are, I promise Alice, I'll give you every opportunity to find a cure, which as someone who is thinking of her in a romantic way is probably the one to pick. Then the others are, how long have you been concealing this? Which would maybe start to drive a bit of a wedge between us if we're being accusatory like that. And I can't give you that kind of guarantee is definitely driving a wedge between us because she's not going to be happy with that. So while I think on that, I am going to drink some of my tea. I don't know what it is, but I don't feel ready to record if I don't have a cup of tea sitting beside me, even though it's been sitting there now for the guts of half an hour and has gone, like, it's lukewarm at best, but still just knowing it's there and I can take a sup from it is nice, and it still tastes nice. Good. Right, back to the decision though. We're gonna go all in on this, so we're falling for Alice, and we now know that she's actually suffering from the waking death, and we'll give her the chance to find a cure. And I think at least at this stage we're serious about that if we find a cure and she decides that she wants to just test it on herself, and we'll probably just say yeah without any argument, and probably go against Ayoko, who won't be happy about it alone. But that's what we're going to do. I promise, Alice, I'd give you every opportunity to find a cure. Nope. Again, please stop doing that. Right, there we go. We made a vow, apparently. I promise you. You see her smile with relief at your response. Thank you, Gamel. I knew I could trust you with this. She pauses, looking out into the expanse of the cavern. Being out here, away from the university, it's frightening, but also liberating. Almost sounds as if you're glad to have left, you replied. Don't misunderstand me, she says. The teaching I received was sometimes exceptional, and the books. I've never seen so many medical tomes in one library. But many of the physicians and surgeons were old, slow to change. They weren't open to trying new techniques, new observation. It could be so... Alice moves her hand in the air, searching for the term. Stifling. You're speaking from personal experience, I can tell. Remnants of her frustration are obvious, even in the gloom. Have you heard of the peat adder? She asks. The name comes from the peat bogs, where they tend to dwell. Has quite a venomous bite. Vaguely. Bites usually require amputation, if I recall. That's what I was taught too, Alice says. You catch some resentment in her tone. But it's not correct. I've read some literature. Physic of the Marsh Lands. It contained a wonderful chapter about the properties of sphagnum moss, including a treatment for peat adder bites. You notice that your colleague is rolling up the sleeve of her robe as she continues to speak. When I introduced this idea to the great and wise teachers of my university, they turned me away. Wouldn't even let me show them the book. As far as they were concerned, amputation was the only solution. Well, does this look like amputated to you? Alice pushes her now bare forearm towards you, holding it in the dim candlelight. You see a patch of rough skin, dotted with darkened red welts. As you look closer, you can make out the scarred puncture marks. You were bitten by a peat adder, you ask. Let myself be bitten, she replies, sounding proud. It was the only way to prove to those dusty frauds that I knew what I was doing. The 2 days of fever were worth the looks on their faces. After that, did they adopt your treatment? No. They forbade me to leave the university grounds for 2 months and had me doing menial tasks until I'd learned my lesson. She reaches out with her hand and you feel her fingertips touching the edges of your mask. That's why finding someone who allows me to be myself has felt so important. Okay, so this revelation kind of, it puts us on a little bit on edge, I think, because we've just made a promise to her, thinking that she was just talking in kind of hypothetical, as you know, as like, okay, she does seemingly have the waking dead, but hypothetical in terms of, if we do find a treatment, if we need someone to test it on, they will test it on me. Whereas now we found out that she's actually went and got herself bitten by an adder so that she could then prove that a treatment worked. So that changes how we look at how she's approaching things. It's not just a case of it's not just a case of sort of a desperation to save her from the waking dead. It's now a case of, this is her MO. This is what she does. She goes against convention and tries things that others wouldn't, but also puts herself in danger while doing it. So now we're not as maybe committed to it, because now we're thinking, what kind of dangerous cure is she going to try to give herself for the waking dead? And do we want to take that risk with her life? And do we want to be responsible for the consequences of that? So I think our thinking on that matter, you know, we definitely have things to think about, put it that way. I couldn't even imagine holding you back. You're extraordinary. So that again would be falling into the whole, we are just some love-struck puppy who has no thoughts of their own, who's just enamored with this woman, and we just go with what she says. We try to avoid any conflict because that might ruin things between us. The next one, I'm flattered, Alice, but let's not take this beyond friendship. This isn't what I want, Alice. I'm sorry. Okay. So, yeah, it's kind of, we're put in this situation now where in order to fulfill our romantic ambitions, and basically get the woman that we've been after almost since we saw her. We've got to commit fully to this whole idea that the way she does things is the right way to do them. And I'm not sure that's true. But then the other ones, so first of all, this isn't what I want, Alice, I'm sorry. I don't think we would do that at all, because it is what we want. And I don't think we would be brave enough to take the chance of losing what we think exists between us at this stage to actually come out and say that, because that would just burn all the bridges. So that's not going to happen. Then the whole, let's not take this beyond friendship. Again, it's not really, I can't see an option other than the first one, even though the first one is obviously folly, and I think we do know that. It's not a case of we're just blindly going into this. I think we would be aware of, at least to some degree, of the decision that we're making here, that this woman is very driven and committed to doing things in her way, and she's not going to let anything stand in the way of that. And we're, I think, at least aware that making this decision to become romantically involved in her is going to get us in trouble because of that. Because that's against, I think, the way that we would do things. We'd probably be more considered. As you can see, because we've been taking ages to make this decision, that we probably are more considered. But we would definitely be more considered than she is, and more cautious with things. We'd certainly be willing to experiment, but in a controlled manner, rather than this whole thing of, hey, I've got infected with something, this might be a cure, let me take it and let's see what happens. So, but as I said, we're aware of all that, but we're still going to do this. I think Gamel, being a plague doctor, probably doesn't get that much chance to have romantic liaisons, because you can imagine most of his time is spent either in a situation where there's a plague happening or traveling between one plague and another. So when he's there, most people would keep their distance. The mask creates a barrier, and the only people really that you could feel kinship towards are the other plague doctors. Now there is Lucy as well, who actually got under or got beyond that kind of barrier, which is probably strange for Gamel as well. So even though Gamel is committing to this, there is still something there with Lucia. But for now, I think he's maybe looking into her eyes, candlelight flickering there. He's heard what she said, but he just wants this so much right now. So I couldn't ever imagine holding you back. You're extraordinary. She's buoyed by your words, pressing herself closer as she pushes your mask upward to reveal your face. The tips of her fingers trace down your cheek, moving her palm to cup the shape of your jaw. Your lips meet in a kiss. Her hair falls against your face. You shift as something hard jabs against the small of your back. Alice moves her head back in surprise, concerned by your sudden discomfort. Feeling around behind you, your hand finds a protruding segment of rock. You break into a relieved laugh. Am I missing something? Alice asks. We were just interrupted by what is now my least favourite portion of this cavern, you reply, moving your body so she can see the prominence of the shape that was recently trying to burrow its way to your kidney. Alice puts a hand to her mouth. It doesn't prevent her laughter. Well, I'm glad to know it wasn't something I did. Or sorry, I did, she says between breaths. Suppose the moment's passed, you say, wishing it were not the case. Your colleague points to a returning glow. Looks like Ayoko is coming back in any case. You share a smile as you pull your mask back into place. Another time, she whispers. With a hoarse greeting, Ayoko announces his return. He holds up a small bundle of brittle roots. Found these on my travels, he says, scattering them over the remains of the old fire. Should burn if we're persistent. Setting the lantern down, he unhooks a pouch from his belt. Caught these too, over in the stream. You look inside the bag. 3 diminutive fish lie against one another. You two get up to anything interesting? He asks. Nothing much, Alice deadpans. All right. Then let's get a proper fire started. Take respite around the fire. The warmth of the fire soothes your outstretched palms as Ayoko pulls some salted meat from your remaining supplies. Alice tosses another pair of roots into the blaze. They crackle and spit, sending a thin trail of smoke toward the cavern's hidden heights. You take a swig from a shared flask of water and stare at the wriggling flames, pondering the source of the unseen flow of air that animates their movements. You ask me, sleeping here would be a risk, Ayoko says between chews. What if we're on top of the plague source? We'd be exposed for hours. He pauses, then points to the fire. Could be in those roots. Then we'd be inhaling it all night. I think we all appreciate the danger in coming down here, Alice replies, but we all need rest, and this spot has shelter. Of a sort. She gestures at the flames and at the food in Ayoko's hand. And warmth, sustenance. We can't reject all that on the mere suspicion of contagion. Alice is right, you say, pushing a hand underneath your mask to rub some drowsiness from your eyes. It would be folly to push onward while exhausted. Ayoko shrugs, either convinced by your arguments or too tired to offer any further debate on the matter. You find your gaze drawn to the elongated shadows cast by the strong blaze, creeping and subsiding across the surface of the rock like an ethereal tide. I feel the heat of the flames. The sound of Alice's clapped palms jolts you back to the moment. Enough dreariness and woe. I'm tired of reflecting on how hopeless our situation feels, she says. Got a panacea for what ails us? Ayoko asks, fishing the last morsel of meat and licking the salt from his fingers. You're mocking me, but I do have a distraction in mind, and since you're so eager, you can go first. What's your finest medical accomplishment? Ayoko groans as he takes the flask from your hands. Come on, old man. I know you're proud of something. Oh, let's get rid of that again. Guess that's so, he admits, taking a drink and setting the container beside him. Right. Well, second year at the Crown's behest, he adds, a sarcastic royal embellishment with his wrist. Poor lad got brought to the tent with an arrowhead in his chest, pierced right through, beneath the right eye. Now, I'm barely a surgeon at this time. I think this bastard is finished, but since he's dead either way, I decide to use the Bradmore method. Which is, you ask, leaning forward. I was getting to it. You use these twigs of elder pith, wrapped in linen and dipped in honey. Ayoko tries to demonstrate the size with his fingers. If you can get them in, they keep the wound open, enlarge it. Then you can reach in with some narrow tongs and He makes a popping sound with his mouth. "Since you're telling the story, I presume he lived," says Alice. "He did," Ayoko nods. "Wine and vinegar kept the infection away. It was painful, ugly, and he had a bloody big scar to show his husband." He sits back. "My finest moment, without doubt." "What about you, Alice?" you ask. Without hesitation, she replies, "Surviving university with my sanity intact." "That's all you're going to say?" Ayoko says after enough silence has passed. "And here I was pouring out my life's history." He turns his head towards you. "Suppose that makes it your turn, Gamel." You know just what story to tell. It practically defines your approach to medicine. I solved the mystery of the brown urine epidemic in Horsham. I saved the life of a hole in her skull. I am merely a conduit for better powers. So forget that. Convincing the Archdeacon of Yeltonshire to buy a crate of useless straw. Scaring the son of the Baroness to take his medicine. The time to stitch my own wound. Okay. It's gotta be this one. It kind of fits the whole surgeon thing better than any of the others, I think. I saved the life of a woman by putting a hole in her skull. I was passing through a town heading home after a different assignment, just minding my own business in the local tavern. There's a sudden commotion by the door, people pointing my way. Then I see a group of townsfolk carrying a woman, bleeding from a wound in her head that I can't yet see. You point to your head, indicating the flow of blood. One of the men carrying her asks whether I'm a surgeon, begs me to help her. I clear a space on the table and ask them to lay her on it. Not the best location, but I can tell she needs urgent intervention. "What had happened?" Alice asks. "I never really found out. Some kind of fall or accident in the fields, perhaps a combination of the two. But I could tell almost at once that the situation was grave. The blow she had taken had fractured the skull, and I knew trepanning was her best hope." Ayoko nods. "I heard the same from older surgeons when I was still wet behind the ears. Relieve the pressure or the patient would die." "Exactly," you reply. "I was able to cut out a small section, then remove the depressed and shattered fragments of bone. Got lucky with infection, since the tavern table was far from pristine, but she lived." "Fascinating," Alice says. "I've read about the procedure, but never met one who'd performed it." "Now you have," you say, performing a modest seated bow. "That was the day I learned that sometimes a surgeon's role is to make a wound larger, and to always be grateful for good fortune." You sit back, your tale complete. Retelling it has stirred some old memories, and you feel more confident in your abilities. It is as if describing your talents out loud has reaffirmed your skill. Ayoko yawns and pokes at the remains of the fire with his boot. While you are talking, the blaze has diminished, allowing the gloomy confines of the cavern to once again shrink around you. "There's only room for two in that alcove," he says. "Which one of us sleeps outside by the fire?" Alice glances at you. You share a look across the fire. "Oh, I see," Ayoko says, chuckling. "You two get comfortable. I'll warm my old bones by these embers. Find sleep beneath the earth." I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, maybe consider hitting the subscribe button there on the right, or checking out some other videos here on the left, or perhaps you might even share with some friends.